Well, nuclear's back in the headlines this morning, folks, so let's bring in the Nationals MP Keith Pitt, his response to all of this. So basically, we've got a bill, according to Chris Bowen. Keith Pitt, good to see you, by the way. $387 billion, that's the hefty price tag to go nuclear. Does that sound about right to you?
The people of Australia have certainly got a bill. It's the one that's been put up by the Labor Party. Mate, this is the team that brought you the modelling that said your power price was going down by $275. I think it's a stunt. Chris Bowen and the Labor Party have built their house of cards on the GenCost report as its base. That's been discredited entirely by Claire Lehman and others in The Australian. And everyone that's watching, who in their right mind would think you can build two lots of generation, one that's intermittent in wind and solar, and then another one which actually has to be reliable, and that would be cheaper than just building one? I think it's a complete nonsense. It's a political attack, and that's all they've got.
Okay, well, just to back up on the figures, it comes from the Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water using GenCost 2023 and public AEMO data. So are you doubting that?
Well, public AEMO data is pretty straightforward. It's what exists. The GenCost report, I was on a committee which looked at that. We had evidence from the people who put it together. They said they got the cost for nuclear from a consultant. The consultant said they got it from a website. The owner of the website said that it had never existed and they dispute it entirely, but they still rely on it. So I think that this is entirely being built as a house of cards for Chris Bowen. I think the people of Australia can see through this for what it is. I mean, seriously, they can build tens of thousands of kilometres of transmission, massive offshore wind forests, millions of hectares of solar, and then still have to build a whole nother electricity generation system for when that doesn't work, and somehow that's cheaper. Mate, just last week they've announced they've got to put up the cap on wholesale generation because no one's going to be able to deliver what's necessarily at under $13,000 roughly a megawatt. It's now more than $20,000 for the cap. That can only put up prices.
Okay, so if $387 billion, which is AUKUS levels really, if that's not accurate, what in your view is more accurate?
Well, the coalition will put those costings out as we come close to the election. That's what Ted O'Brien, the Shadow Minister, is working on in the Shadow Cabinet. And that is not unusual. That's usually how it works. And I'm pleased you've raised AUKUS, mate. I don't understand why Labor continues to fight this. They have to build a nuclear industry in Australia. You need a domestic industry. You must have high-level radioactive waste storage facilities. You lift the moratorium to build these submarines in Adelaide. Everything has to be done, apart from putting one actually on Australian soil. So I just don't understand the resistance. So,
I mean, you know this space better than most people, Keith. Have you got a rough estimate on what a total bill would be to go nuclear?
Well, I haven't sat down and worked that out, but I know if you're not building transmission...
Would it be half, though? I mean...
Getting other easements... Oh, mate, I'm not going to put a figure on it because this is the work that Ted O'Brien and others are doing. So quite simply, if you're going to utilise existing brownfield sites that have transmission lines already with something that works all of the time, 100%, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that is always going to be better than building two systems, one of which is entirely unreliable and has to be replaced every 20 years and in fact is really bad for the environment. Even Madeleine King, the Minister for Resources, says you need 9 times as many resources for wind and solar as you do for an equivalent in gas per megawatt. That's a lot of mining and that's a lot of product. Okay,
a few more stats that have been suggested in this release this morning, that 71 small modular reactors would be needed. Does that marry up with your estimations?
Well, the whole generation network is roughly 60 gigawatts. It might be a little bit less than that. So it depends on the size, it depends on where you put them, it depends on exactly how many you require. So you've got Labor out there building literally millions of hectares of solar, this is the suggestion, thousands and thousands of wind turbines, including offshore. And mate, just the one offshore in New South Wales, it's 1,000 turbines. There was a proposal put forward to put in just one exploration rig offshore in New South Wales, and the locals went Burko. I mean, what about the whales? Their proposal is nonsense.
Okay.
It won't be delivered in the time frame that's been put
up.
So
71, you're not sure?
The Australian people are onto them.
Small reactors, you're not sure about that 71?
Well, I haven't costed it, and it depends on how many and what size and what location.
And just another one here, Keith. I mean, this is back to the figures now. The capital costs, $18,000 for nuclear. I think it's about $25,000 per taxpayer, as opposed to about $2,000 for wind, $1,000 for solar. So, I mean, if that's right, then does that back up Chris Bowen's suggestion that, renewables are the cheapest way to go?
Well, that's the point I made earlier. The GenCost report was completely discredited. And the people who they said they got it from said that it was wrong. So, I mean, this will be a space which is obviously contested. I just don't understand Labor's reluctance. They have to build a nuclear industry. It will be in Australia as part of all.
Well, that's the reluctance there, I suppose, is the spend.
Well, I don't think they've got no problem spending your money on everything else, I've got to say. If anyone thinks cost of living has gone down, well, I think they're mistaken. This government is absolutely killing the Australian people on cost of living. It just continues to go up. Power prices are up. Cost of food is up. Transport is up. They increased the fuel price for transport, for logistics, in the most recent budget. That can only drive up food prices. This is what you get in a Labor government.
Okay, Keith Pitt, good to see you. We'll talk to you again soon.